I'm 56, the kind of man who keeps the mower blades sharp and the coffee maker descaled. Who knows which breaker feeds the garage and which one always trips when the toaster and microwave gang up on a Sunday morning. I believe the rest of my life would be a straight, comfortable stretch of highway. Mortgage almost done, 2 grown kids out proving we did more right than wrong, retirement accounts fat and boring. Then my wife started going to the gym at 6 a.m. And a grainy clip from the doorbell camera uprooted the life I thought I understood in less than 10 seconds of shaky video. If you've ever watched the dominoes fall in slow motion and still been surprised when the last one clatters, you know the feeling in my ribcage that day, like a drawer that won't close all the way. I didn't set out to be suspicious. I'm an electrician, not a detective. But edits creep into a marriage the way hum creeps into a line. Tiny changes you don't notice until the light flickers. First, it was little things. Her phone used to nap face up on the coffee table. Suddenly it learned to sleep face down. She used to share playlists with me. Now there were AirPods and a smile at nothing. She traded drugstore moisturizer for a brand you have to pronounce from the back of your throat and started taking the long way to a gym that, as far as I could tell, required crossing 2 interstate exits and a personality test. I wanted to be the guy who cheers you on while you chase your better self. I told myself this was that. People change. Midlife is a funny, itchy sweater. Then the doorbell camera sent me a delivery photo at 6:18 a.m. One of those little squares with a cardboard box sitting at our doormat like a well-behaved terrier. Behind the package stood my wife's car in the driveway. She had left for the gym at 6 sharp. Maybe she forgot something and swung back. I told myself. Maybe the app's timestamps glitch. Maybe. It's incredible the shapes a grown man can fold himself into to avoid what he's already clutching in his fist. I printed 3 months of card statements at the kitchen table while the dog breathed potato chip air under my chair. I found a new coffee shop in the industrial park she never mentioned, the kind with concrete floors and succulents that look like they charge monthly rent. 2 receipts from a motel off Route 41. Both lunchtime check-ins. Both politely listed as day rate. Could have been a spa with a really poor sense of branding, right? Sure. I wanted a reason not to believe my eyes, so I did what people do. I looked for a reason to keep stalling. Our homeowners association group text chimed that afternoon. Susan the enforcer asked if anyone else had noticed a white pickup idling on our street around 11. The attached screenshot was from the camera at lot 17. That's us. I was on a school job, sweating copper and patience under fluorescent lights. My phone lit up twice. First with the HOA photo. Then with my wife's selfie from the gym mirror, her inexpensive leggings and a caption about deadlifts. A white pickup with a dented rear fender. I filed that away next to the motels and the industrial coffee. That night I asked about her workouts. She told me about a trainer with a name that sounded like the thud of a door closing, the kind of name you can only get away with if you're carved like a canoe. I asked lightly what he had her doing. She said back work, glut activation, a lot of core. She said it in that breezy tone people use about something they're taking very seriously. I pictured a man with a whistle and a smile full of veneers, and I didn't like myself for picturing him at all. When a storm's building, any sailor checks his knots. I booked a consultation with a family law attorney without announcing my guilt to the world. I sat in her office under a framed photo of Lake Michigan and told her I didn't want to blow up my life by guessing wrong or acting cruelly and then being wrong on top of it. She didn't pat my hand or tell me to be a man. She told me to breathe. She told me not to move out of the house. She told me to gather facts without breaking laws, to separate the emotional from the financial, to stop charging anything jointly that could later look like I endorsed a fantasy I didn't know about. She told me not to confront in a way that could ever be read as intimidation. I left with a yellow folder and a strange calm, the way you feel walking the perimeter before a storm and at least knowing where you left the buckets. 2 days later our son, 23 and still learning to fold towels like a sober adult, swung by to use the laundry. He tossed out a comment about mom hitting the gym on Sundays now. He said she came back one afternoon smelling like gasoline. Like some ancient truck was coughing right under her window. He said it and moved on because he didn't know what he'd just set on fire. I'd seen the HOA screenshot. White pickup, old cough, gasoline breath. He didn't mean to, but he handed me the last screw for a box I was already wiring. I told my wife I'd be staying with my brother one night to help him replace a service panel. In truth, I parked 2 streets over and watched my own house the way a man watches a fire he wants to pretend is contained. At 10:40 a.m., her car turned into the driveway. 15 minutes later, the white pickup rolled to a stop. Rear fender dented. A man got out, built like a gym poster and wearing a shirt 2 sizes tighter than any I've met at church. I let him walk in. I gave myself a full minute. Then I drove home and let myself through my front door like a man paying his bill. I won't give you movie dialogue because real life isn't written that way. The bedroom door was ajar. Not dramatic, not shocked. Just ajar, as if comfort had left it that way for months. I heard a low laugh that didn't belong to me and her voice in a register that hadn't spoken my name in too long. I stood in the hall with my wedding ring feeling heavy and fought the urge to make a scene that would only burn me and my kids later. I told them from the doorway to put clothes on and meet me in the kitchen. The trainer introduced himself with a handshake that felt like a gym membership brochure. I introduced myself with the name I'd signed on mortgage papers and school forms and Valentine's cards. I set a folder on the table with the financial printouts and the HOA photo, with the motel receipts lined up like neat lies. I used my inside voice. I asked him to leave my home. He did. My wife sat at the table with both hands around a mug she hadn't filled, staring at steam that wasn't there. There are 1,000 ways people justify themselves when they're cornered by what they did. She called it a phase, a blindness, a moment, a wish to be seen, a way back to feeling like a person and not just the coordinator at the dental clinic and the lady who clips grocery coupons professionally. She said she didn't plan it. She said she got lost and then kept walking because turning around felt twice as hard. She said the trainer had a way of looking at her the way I used to. She said that last part softly, not like an accusation but a diagnosis. I sat with a coffee cup and a heart I wasn't going to hold out for anyone to drop again, and I told her we would schedule therapy and STI tests and talk to a lawyer. I told her we would move to separate rooms in our own home while we sorted it. I told her I wasn't going to explode, but I was also not going to pretend. She cried in the tired, embarrassed way people cry when they fear there's no movie ending coming. Just paperwork and mornings that feel like the hangover from a very long party. I slept in the guest room for the first time in our marriage. The mattress squeaked like my left knee on stairs. The dog lay at the doorway as if he was a bouncer in a bar where everyone's had enough. The next morning I woke up with a clear head you don't get at 20 because you don't know yet how expensive clarity is. We saw a therapist. She wore comfortable shoes and a cardigan and told us nothing we didn't already know but needed to hear in better grammar. She said no contact with the trainer, not even the goodbye letter my wife insisted would make her feel like a good person again. For 3 days, peace pretended it could stick. Then a coffee receipt from the industrial park surfaced in the kitchen trash, dated 2 days after therapy. I set it on the table like a place card. She said she wanted closure. I said the word no in a tone I've practiced my whole life when turning off breakers. Calm, correct, final. The trainer had a wife. Of course he did. She found me through a combination of HOA gossip and social media breadcrumbs. She asked to talk. We did, and it wasn't the mud fight you'd assume. She had small kids and a voice that sounded like a windshield wiper on the slow setting. We agreed on facts. We promised each other we wouldn't torch our own houses any more than necessary. We exchanged screenshots like 2 people trading sandbags in a flood. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to stop rewriting itself in front of my eyes. I filed for legal separation. Not because I wanted to dangle her with a rope, but because I needed the debt angler a court can apply to finances and boundaries. We worked out sleeping arrangements and grocery lists like diplomats dividing maps. I put a freeze on joint credit. I monitored my 401k the way you check a sump pump in a storm, often gratefully with a flashlight. I added a pin to anything that had our names on it like it was a front door in the bad part of town. 1 week turned into 1 month. In that month, I remembered what my own company sounds like at 10 p.m. I went to bed at a responsible hour in a room that smelled like wood polish and laundry soap instead of a history lesson I wasn't ready to take. I made breakfast without flinching at every footstep. I worked longer at the library retrofit and the daycare expansion, not to hide from home but because it felt good to be in rooms where wires tell the truth. Current is honest. You touch it, it shocks. Words aren't like that. Words sneak around corners and put on hats and come home pretending they were somewhere else. We told our adult children in careful, plain language. Our daughter cried and squeezed my forearm until it hurt and told me she wanted me hugged by someone who meant it, even if that someone wasn't their mother. Our son's jaw clenched and relaxed the way mine did when he was 3 and trying not to cry on the playground. He didn't take sides because we didn't ask him to. He took a position next to me because he knows where the sturdy railing is when stairs get slick. They are grown and kind and practical, and they text me now about recipes and vacuum repairs like I'm a hotline staffed by a father who remembers where the toolbox lives. My wife wrote me a letter around week 6. It was everything letters like that always are when you've been alive long enough to recognize the shape. Regret, promises, admissions, a thread of blame that pretends not to be there, and then a paragraph at the end about how the trainer had helped her see parts of herself she wanted to protect as a friend. The word friend sat in my stomach like a bolt someone forgot to tighten. I set the letter down. I walked the dog. I came back and filed for divorce. Mediation came like a steady rain that soaks you slowly. We divvied up a life that, as it turns out, fits into file folders and Zillow listings. We agreed to sell the house with the apple tree that never made decent apples and the garage pegboard I'd labeled over 2 summers. We agreed on a timeline and alimony that didn't turn either of us into villains, just people of our age trying to cover the next 3 years without drowning. She kept her car and the guest room furniture she somehow slept better on. I kept my truck and every tool that has ever felt like an extension of my hand. We cut our retirement like a pie I earned with overtime and she baked with care over decades. We decided which Christmas ornaments go to which kid. I wrote down the dates for water heater maintenance and gutter cleanings and handed them over like a prayer someone else could say with their own voice now. The trainer stopped working at that gym. I know because men talk in barbershops and hardware aisles in ways that aren't gossip so much as the weather report. I saw his truck later near the cheap apartments by the freeway, a new taillight blinking silently like a metal U by yourself. I didn't feel the zing of victory I'd imagined in angry minutes. I felt a tired something, the flavor of a long day ending without the satisfaction of having built something. On the day the judge signed our divorce, I walked out of the courthouse into an afternoon that smelled like distant rain and hot breaks. No trumpet, no moral, just a signed paper that meant I could breathe air I hadn't had to borrow from someone who kept changing locks. I went to the warehouse store and bought a brand new pillow that stays cool and a jar of pickles the size of a toddler. Freedom in your late 50s doesn't look like it does in movies. It looks like sleeping until your body decides to wake you and a refrigerator full of things you wanted and no one judged. I bought a small ranch house with 2 bedrooms and the kind of backyard where you can see yourself drinking coffee for a string of ordinary mornings. I painted the kitchen a quiet color and found a clock that makes the same soft tick my grandfather's farm radio used to make when I stayed with him as a kid. The first night, there was one of those sleeps you only get after a fever breaks. The dog approved. He turned in a circle 3 times and landed like a dropped loaf of bread. And that's a review in a language I trust. Routine made a house into a home. I started most mornings on the back step with the mug that fits my hand best, listening to birds I finally learned the names of. I went to work. I came home. I fixed a leaky faucet and felt like I'd rescued myself from a newspaper headline I didn't want to star in. On Fridays, I fished at the reservoir with my friend Jack, a retired firefighter who says more with a nod than most people say in a monologue. We grilled on a hand-me-down kettle that he insisted I needed more than he did, and he was right. You can't avoid running into your own past in a town like ours. One afternoon at the grocery store, a place where love and milk both expire, I saw my ex-wife reading bread labels like they were poetry. We looked at each other. She told me I looked thinner. I told her sleep will do that. She said she was sorry again in a voice that sounded like someone standing outside of a house and recognizing the windows. I said I was sorry too, and meant it for all the good things that got buried when we both stopped looking in the right places. We left down different aisles, which felt appropriate. You don't need to bang a drum every time you walk away. Sometimes a shopping cart squeaky wheel is enough music, because life isn't only about what breaks, I'll tell you about something I built. I found a 1998 Airstream on a classifieds board, dented and smoking the faintest of old life. I brought it home like a stray and ran new wiring through its bones because I'm me and that's what I know how to trust. I polished aluminum until my shoulders ached good, painted the cabinets a white that made morning light behave, bolted down a small table and a stovetop that hissed like a kitten when you ask it nicely. When I hitched it to the truck and drove north, the road peeled under us like a strip of old film and I felt 20 with the wisdom to stop being 20 when it counts. I parked by Lake Superior and listened to water talk in its language. Lonely and alone are different things. That's something the lake told me without using a word. I didn't become a monk. I didn't go on dates like a teenager set loose at spring break either. A neighbor 2 houses down, a widow with a dog that hates rain as much as mine does, asked once if I wanted to walk after dinner. We did. We talked about broken appliances and the price of blueberries and how strange it is to be exactly the age you are, to feel both heavier and somehow bouncier than you thought you'd be. We didn't promise anything and I didn't ask for more than the quiet way she laughs like the seam in a favorite shirt. There's time. There's no rush. If something grows there, it'll be because we watered it, not because we dropped it from a helicopter and hoped. As for what it's like to be single at my age, let me put it like this. You learn to set the thermostat to what you actually prefer. You relearn how to shop for one and not hate yourself for buying grapes you'll eat alone. You teach your hands not to reach for a second fork when you open the silverware drawer. You get to notice the way afternoon light slides across your floor without turning it into a metaphor for loss. You go to church and receive the peace from people who know something happened because you are in their line of sight, but who were raised right enough not to pry. You discover that a Saturday with no plan can be as rich as the kind of weekend that used to require invitations and iron shirts. I won't tell you I never look back. I won't pretend I don't sometimes smell her shampoo on a sweater I forgot to donate and feel a ping behind my ribs. But the past isn't a haunted house I'm required to tour every night. I took what was worth carrying. 2 adult children who are funny and brave and call on Father's Day without needing to be reminded. A constellation of friends you can count on to carry a sofa or bring soup. A skill set that keeps the lights on. And the memory of a long stretch of time where we were a family that worked most days. I left what would only chew through the bag if I packed it. The arguments that circled the drain, the phone face down, the word friend used in the wrong place. The trainer's wife sent me a message months after the ink dried. She told me she filed her own paperwork, that her kids were in therapy learning the kind of words children shouldn't need this early but will be better for knowing. She told me I had handled myself without turning into an explosion in someone else's story. I don't know if that's true. I know I worked very hard not to make a mess bigger than the one already on the floor. If there's any advice buried in the electrical tape and court dates of what happened, it's this: hire the attorney before the argument, get the health check before the reconciliation, and keep your documents like you keep your cool, where you can reach them without fumbling. People ask, when they hear my version of events, whether I'd take her back if she hadn't written that last paragraph about friendship with the man who helped blow a hole in our roof. I tell them I don't live in the hypothetical house anymore. I live in the one with the squeaky screen door that I'll oil when the weather cools. I live in the morning where coffee is hot and my phone sits face up because it's just a phone. I live in a body that aches in predictable places and a mind that doesn't. I live in a future that wasn't the one I planned, but fits better than the last year of the one I had. There's a version of this story where I behave worse and feel justified. There's a version where I stay and punish both of us until something in me calcifies and my kids inherit a father they don't like. There's a version where I pretend nothing happened because the neighbors might talk, as if neighbors aren't people with bigger problems than my pride. I didn't choose those versions. I chose the long, boring strength of walking the right way down a hallway and closing a door that needed closing. It's not heroic. It's adult, which in my 50s sometimes feels rarer. If you're listening to this in a truck on a night shift or in a kitchen between pills with the labels taped big enough to read without your glasses, hear this from me, the man who still keeps spare batteries in a drawer labeled with a label maker like an absolute fool. You can build a strong life after someone knocks over the shelves. It won't look like your old life in the ways you think you miss most. It will taste like quiet coffee and a clean pillowcase and an empty ring finger you stop touching after a while. It will look like your own face in the mirror, not happier every day, but less startled. One morning you'll realize the doorbell camera didn't notify you all week because you weren't waiting for it to catch a story you didn't want to live anymore. I still mow in straight lines because that's who I am. I still oversalt a steak because that's who I am. I still pause at the garage wall at the outline of the hammer and the missing screwdriver, and put the hammer back exactly where it goes because order keeps the mind from rattling in its casing. The difference is that I'm not arranging my life around a lie, not even a polite one. I learned the angle at which the late light falls through the maple in back and hits the kitchen floor, a gold rectangle that makes me feel the precise weight of being here and alive in my own house. If love shows up again, she can find me at the picnic table with the wobble I finally fixed, drinking coffee I didn't have to share if I didn't feel like it. If she doesn't, I'll still be here, and that believe a man with a label maker is more than fine. There's one last piece I haven't said aloud because it feels like touching a live wire to prove to yourself it's hot. After the court and the couch and the email to the trainer's wife and the counseling bills and the clearing of the top drawer in the nightstand, I stood in my living room one Tuesday night and said goodnight to no one at all. I clicked off the lamp. I felt the room change temperature the way rooms do. And I understood that closing a chapter isn't a fireworks show. It's a quiet, decisive click. It's the sound of a man knowing which breaker kills the power to the thing that kept misfiring and flipping the switch with a steady hand. That's all. That's enough. I kept some of the photos, the ones where we're both young and too earnest not to root for. They live on a shelf where I don't see them unless I'm looking for something else. When I do, I don't hiss like a cat at a vacuum cleaner. I nod at the version of us who did the best we could until we didn't, and I put them back. The person I am now doesn't need to burn the past to warm the future. I have blankets. I have a thermostat. I have a dog who snores when it rains. I'm all right. On Sundays, if I don't feel like church, I take the Airstream out to the county park and sit under the awning while the sky tries on different shades of blue. Sometimes the widow 2 doors down brings a thermos of tea and we tell the kind of stories you tell when you've learned you can lose what you love and still keep a sense of humor. Sometimes I sit by myself and fix something small. A drawer that sticks, a light that flickers because a connection came loose. I tighten it. The light steadies. The job is finished when the light is honest again. There's a metaphor in there if you want one. If you don't, there's just a light that works. At 56, that's the kind of poetry I keep. If you were waiting for a dramatic last act, a knock on the door and a plea, it didn't come. What came was the mail and the electric bill and a postcard from my daughter with a drawing of a Chicago skyline and a note about a student who told a joke she wasn't supposed to laugh at and did anyway. What came was my son borrowing my socket set and returning it a day late with a sheepish text and a 12-pack he can't afford. What came, most of all, was a life that didn't require me to stand guard at the edge of my own bed. You can't put a price on that, though a judge tried and did a decent job. Now and then I drive past the old house. The apple tree looks the same, promising, stingy. A new family lives there. There's chalk on the driveway and a scooter in the grass. I feel something like gratitude that the street gets to hear children again. I don't pull over. My hands stay at 10 and 2. I picture their kitchen with different magnets on the fridge. I wish them the ordinary joy of not reading receipts like crime scenes. I wish them the kind of small arguments that end with dishes done and not a Google search for attorneys. I'm not sure anyone truly gets the marriage they thought they were signing up for. We all swear to a thing we can't actually see because it hasn't been built yet. Some people get to the finish line together, bruised but laughing. Some of us peel off and meet at the concession stand 30 years later with a different team. I used to think that meant failure, a word like a gavel. Now I think it means the plan changed and we didn't, and both of those things can be true at once. I am allowed to say we had a good long run, and also I'm glad it's over. It's not betrayal to mean both. It's an accurate map to the terrain I walked. If you're on the edge of your own discovery, if you've got a photo from a doorbell camera you wish you could unsee or an HOA text you can't explain away, I can't tell you what to do. I can tell you what didn't ruin me. I didn't break laws for proof. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't turn my kids into judges. I didn't call her names even when a few sat on my tongue like nails. I did hire a lawyer. I did get a checkup. I did set boundaries that made me sleep. I did allow for grief without building a shrine. I did remember to feed the dog. I did keep the appointment with the mower because the grass keeps growing no matter what happens in bedrooms or courtrooms or the shadow of a pickup truck in a grainy photo. You maintain the system so the lights stay on. The older men at the hardware store still call me boss even though I haven't supervised anyone harder than my own heartbeat in years. They ask how I'm doing more with their eyebrows than their mouths. I tell them fine and mean it 80% of the time, which is a number I can live with. If they press, I say I sleep good and I eat decent and I'm learning to make peace with the kind of silence that used to scare me. Sometimes one of them will nod toward me and say, not unkindly, that he doesn't know what he'd do if he was me. I usually reply that he does. He just hasn't had to. I'm going to make chili this weekend. It will be too spicy because I will forget that I'm not impressing anyone with heat tolerance anymore. I will eat it with crackers that go stale too fast and I won't mind. I will probably leave the bowl in the sink and then wash it before bed because waking up to a clean sink is a gift I can put in my own pocket. I will take the dog out and watch him sniff 1,000 messages in the lawn and know that not every story needs decoding. I will flip off the porch light on my way in and think, as I often do now, that there is a small, stubborn happiness in flipping the right switch at the right time. It's not romance. It's not fireworks. It's a working circuit. It's enough.